The desert night over Yas Marina looked calm, but inside McLaren, something far sharper was taking shape. Oscar Piastri stepped out of the car with a result any team would celebrate, P2, yet the weight behind his voice told a different story. This wasn't frustration over a bad race. It was the culmination of a season where strategy, timing, and circumstance kept dragging him away from a title he once led by 34 points. If you're watching this, make sure to stay with me. The real story is only just beginning. Abu Dhabi wasn't just another missed chance. It was the clearest proof yet of the pattern he could no longer ignore. He'd beaten Norris on track. He'd managed the hard tires with precision. He'd rediscovered the form that once made him look untouchable, but none of it mattered. From the moment McLaren placed him on that long, fragile opening stint, his race no longer belonged to him. There was only one lifeline, a safety car that never came, while Norris took the clean, controlled route that protected both his podium and McLaren's championship objective. For Piastri, the realization was brutal. His strongest performance in weeks had been trapped inside a strategy never designed to let him fight. What made Abu Dhabi cut so deeply wasn't the outcome, it was the intention behind it. Piastri understood exactly why McLaren did what they did. With the championship on the line, any threat to Norris's podium was unacceptable, and that single truth shaped every call around his race. The hard tire gamble isolated him from the flow of the Grand Prix, turning his strategy into a waiting game he could never win. Each lap he stayed out, Max Verstappen extended the buffer. Each moment the race stabilized, the window he needed slammed shut. Yet Piastri executed everything flawlessly, passing Norris into turn 9, settling immediately into rhythm, managing degradation with maturity. All the ingredients for a real fight were there. But the fight itself never came. His job had become containment, not opportunity. And for a driver who thrives on attacking races rather than preserving them, it felt like being locked inside someone else's plan. If you're enjoying the breakdown so far, remember to subscribe. It helps keep stories like this coming. The sting was not that McLaren favored Norris, but that equal rules had produced unequal possibilities. A truth he finally voiced with calm, almost surgical honesty. As Piastri spoke after the race, it became clear this wasn't a single weekend irritation. It was the final note in a season-long pattern. Abu Dhabi merely exposed it in its purest form. Earlier turning points had already carved away his title lead: the Monza swap, the Qatar miscalculation that wiped out a near-guaranteed win, and the sequence of compromised setups and traffic warp strategies in Austin, Mexico, and Brazil. None were born from mistakes behind the wheel. All were born from circumstances that kept nudging the momentum away from him and toward his teammate. He never accused McLaren of wrongdoing. He never implied Norris was unfairly elevated. He simply traced the architecture of a season in which tiny decisions, tire offsets, timing gambles, risk tolerances, accumulated until his once commanding lead evaporated. Equal treatment, he realized, doesn't mean equal advantage when every strategic fork in the road leans in one direction. What Abu Dhabi provided was clarity. Even at his fastest, even with the car finally behaving beneath him again, he was boxed into a role defined by the team's broader survival priorities. The irony of Abu Dhabi is that Piastri delivered one of his most complete drives of the season while simultaneously being denied any chance to shape the race himself. His hard tire stint, the very choice that limited his options, became a showcase of calm precision. Lap after lap he held the pace, protected the tire, and hit every target the strategy demanded. But perfection only tightened the trap. With Verstappen stretching the gap and Norris fighting tooth and nail to preserve the podium that kept the title alive, the race settled into a rhythm that froze Piastri's possibilities in place. Even when chaos flickered, Norris struggling with Leclerc, Tsunoda lunging desperately, none of it opened a door for him. His role had already been written, the stabilizing force behind McLaren's championship bid. Finishing second wasn't a triumph. It was confirmation of the ceiling imposed by the plan. What made his post-race tone so striking was its lack of bitterness. He wasn't demanding #1 status, nor rewriting history. He was acknowledging a truth few drivers ever say aloud. Sometimes the strategy that protects a team's dream quietly erases a driver's own. What set Piastri's words apart was their emotional precision. He didn't lash out, didn't hint at betrayal, didn't feel conspiracy. Instead, he dissected the season with the calm of someone who finally sees the full picture. He'd learned, painfully, that raw speed isn't enough when the margins are microscopic and strategy shapes outcomes as much as driving. He admitted that at points in the year he felt unstoppable. That surge when he led the championship by 34 points, when every lap felt sharp, every decision instinctive. But Formula One never rewards early momentum. As the calendar shifted into its most technical phase, the strategic landscape stopped aligning with his natural strengths. Piastri thrives in clear, attack-oriented scenarios. He struggles when forced into defensive tire preservation corridors or long, reactive stints designed around someone else's objective. Abu Dhabi exposed that contrast perfectly. On Sunday, he was the faster McLaren. In the season narrative, he was the one left with only mathematical hope. That duality, capable yet constrained, gave his honesty a quiet power. He wasn't defeated by Verstappen or Norris. He was undone by an accumulation of micro-moments that shaped a championship without ever making headlines. By the time the paddock lights dimmed, one truth had crystallized inside McLaren. Piastri hadn't exposed tension, he had finally named it. His reflections weren't emotional outbursts, but a diagnosis of how a title slipped away through forces no driver can control. The team's philosophy of equal treatment had reached its limit in Abu Dhabi. When the championship depended on Norris finishing on the podium, every strategic variable was shaped around preserving that outcome. And in that delicate balance, Piastri became the flexible piece, the one whose race could be stretched, delayed, or sacrificed without endangering the primary objective. Yet his performance refused to fit the supporting role he was given. He had the pace to challenge Verstappen. He had the tire life. He had the form he'd been chasing for weeks. But the structure of the race left him watching opportunities dissolve before they ever reached him. The tension wasn't personal. It was systemic. The unavoidable collision between a team's championship logic and a driver's competitive instinct. In that collision, Piastri found clarity. He had the ingredients of a world champion, but the season had never fully allowed him to use them. Inside McLaren, the emotions were split between triumph and a quieter, sharper realization. Norris stood as a deserved world champion, the product of consistency, resilience, and a season defined by narrow escapes. But alongside that celebration was the other truth Piastri's comments illuminated. He too had driven at a championship level, only to watch his campaign erode through timing, execution, and strategic compromises. None of it stemmed from errors behind the wheel. All of it came from the invisible architecture of race management, where one driver's needs inevitably take precedence when a title is on the line. For McLaren, Abu Dhabi will be remembered not only for the victory lap of a long-awaited championship, but as the race that exposed the limitations of their equal treatment model. The moment securing Norris's podium became the priority, Piastri's chances evaporated. His honesty didn't fracture the garage. It forced it to confront a reality long brewing beneath the surface. And for Piastri himself, the weight of that realization marked a turning point. He now understood exactly where his season had slipped, and none of it was due to lack of speed. As the celebrations faded and the data screens dropped, one final truth lingered over the McLaren garage. This season hadn't broken Oscar Piastri. It had forged him. His comments were not a warning shot, but a statement of intent. He would return sharper, stronger, and far less willing to let circumstances dictate his fate. He had tasted the precision of execution, the pain of lost opportunities, and the razor-thin margins that decide championships. Now he understood them intimately. That kind of frustration doesn't discourage great drivers. It hardens them. For McLaren, the challenge ahead is delicate. They must evolve fast enough to unleash both of their title-caliber drivers without falling into the traps that shaped this year's narrative. Norris may be champion, but Piastri is the driver who could have been under only slightly different conditions. This dual truth is the tension the team must learn to manage. Abu Dhabi will be remembered publicly for the celebration, but inside the team, it marks the beginning of the next story. And before we wrap up, don't forget to stay tuned. The next chapter in this rivalry is already forming. A story where McLaren must prove they can fight for titles without forcing one driver into the shadows of strategy ever again.